The New York Mets need to address their starting rotation this winter, and I got 11 trade targets they should look at.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the #1 daily podcast in the New York Mets. If you want to find any of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the editor-in-chief. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. If your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download FanDuel today. Now, I spent this entire day just combing through rosters and trying to identify the top trade targets the Mets could look at to bolster their starting rotation that I really think could make the biggest impact on the Mets in 2026. And then after coming up with 11 names, I was trying to figure out, okay, how do we organize this thing? So what I did is I went from youngest to oldest, which sets us up in these three segments to go with actually 4 guys who are all still in arbitration. Then in the second segment, we're going to look at 4 more guys who are entering their 30s, who are signed to deals, but are getting close to free agency. I think all of them are 2 years left on their current deals or 2 years of team control left. And then in the final segment, we're going to talk about the elder statesmen, a couple guys who have been around for a long time, who have already signed their big contracts and are nearing the end of those contracts that the Mets could look to pick up. So let's start right at the very top with the youngest pitcher that I've identified as a trade target for the New York Mets. That's a guy that's been around for a little bit, and it's MacKenzie Gore, still a surprising 26 years old. He'll turn 27 in February. This would be an in-division trade, which is not easy to pull off. Gore has 2 years again of arbitration left. Now, he had a really interesting season. First half, he was, I'm pretty sure, an all-star, a clear-cut ace. He was leading Major League Baseball in strikeouts for some time. Pitched to an ERA in the low 3s. Second half, a disaster. ERA of 6.75, just brutal down the stretch. He finished the season with a 4.17 ERA, which is pretty much in line with his career ERA of 4.19. But he has electric stuff from the left side. You put him in the Mets pitching infrastructure, and I think he could absolutely, take his game to another level. I really like the idea of trading for MacKenzie Gore. I just don't know if, one, he's on the block, because at the deadline it sort of seemed like he wasn't. Now, it's the offseason. There's only 2 years left of team control. He had a really bad second half. Maybe they decide to shop him and see what they can get. I think the price in division would probably be a little bit too high to prime for the Nationals. But if you're talking about a guy that could be an ace, that would also not cost you much as far as salary for the next couple years, he makes a lot of sense for the Mets to sort of level out the playing field when it comes to the fact that they have Sean Manaea, Kodai Senga, Clay Holmes. All these guys are making pretty decent amount of money. Clay Holmes, obviously, the least of which, but they have guys, and also have the dead money in Frankie Montas. So if you could pick up a starting pitcher like MacKenzie Gore, then you could even go out and sign another starting pitcher, and now you're really cooking with gas in this rotation. So that's the first guy I identified. The next one still has 3 years of arbitration left, because I believe he's a Super 2 guy, and that is Edward Cabrera from the Miami Marlins. He's 27, will turn 28 in April, coming off a career best season where he pitched to a 3.53 ERA. The reason he was so much more effective, because he got his walks under control. Prior to this season, his walk rate was always over 10%, as high as 15.8% as a rookie and 15.2% in 2023. This past year, the walk rate dipped down to 8.3%. By being on the attack more, he was able to be more effective. 26 starts with 137 and 2/3 innings pitched, a career high, and he had, again, that 3.53 ERA. Did have an injury in the second half, but he was able to return healthy down the stretch. He's definitely a name to watch, but I think the Marlins, kind of similar to the Nationals, would ask for a lot to trade him, especially because they really have, some optimism that they can contend next year. So why not keep Edward Cabrera for now? And if you're out of it by the deadline, then you trade him. So I don't know if he gets moved, but you had to mention him as a candidate, especially because they did shop him at the deadline. Now, here's a rental that is 28 years old that I think makes a lot of sense to target, and that's Kris Bubic from the Royals. Bubic got injured in 2023, had Tommy John surgery, returned at the end of 2024 and pitched out of the bullpen, pitched to a 2.67 ERA out of the pen in 30 and a third innings pitched. But this year, they stretched him back out to be a starting pitcher. He made 20 starts, pitched to a 2.55 ERA in 116 and a third innings pitched. Now, I really love this trade candidate because I think you can maybe get him for less than any of these guys we're going to talk about in this segment. And I just think he's a good bet to gamble on. And I think the Royals are a good trade partner because they have a lot of starting pitching already. Noah Cameron had a breakout season as a rookie. They have Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha, signed to contracts. So they could afford to trade Bubic, and they need bats. So the Mets can trade whether it's one of those infielders that are up at the big league level. I don't know if Mark Vientos is the best fit for the Royals because they have Vinny Pasquantino at first. They have Michael Garcia at third. DH, maybe they want to keep that open for Jack Caglione, but they can also stick him in a corner outfield spot. So I also think that they probably DH Salvador Perez a pretty good amount as well. So Vientos might not be the best fit, but maybe Ronnie Mauricio is. And who knows? I mean, that could be a trade where you give them, let's just say it's Mauricio and I don't know, maybe it's a pitching prospect that's below your top tier. Maybe it's a Jack Weninger, or I don't know if I'd want to give up Santucci in that deal, but regardless, I think you could get Bubic for a pretty fair price, and there's a lot of upside there. But the Royals, they very well could say, you know what, we're going to ride this thing out, see what happens. If we're out of it, we'll flip him at the deadline. If not, we'll hold on to him. We'll have him be part of a rotation for this season, and then we'll tag him with the QO and see what happens in free agency. In worst case scenario, we'll collect our draft compensation. So I think it's an interesting one. I don't know for sure if he's going to be traded, but I would definitely call about him. This next guy, everyone has been talking about, so I don't know how much time we're going to have to spend on him. We're going to do a follow-up show tomorrow where I get into some specific trade packages for my favorites of this group of 11 trade targets. Joe Ryan is going to be talked about a lot this offseason. He was talked about a lot at the trade deadline. One of the few trade pieces the Twins decided not to move. Maybe it's because he's their ace and they're going to try to contend in 2026, or maybe it's because they set a sky-high price that nobody was willing to meet. But Joe Ryan just came off a season where he pitched 171 innings and did so with a 3.42 ERA, the walk per nine at 2.05, the strikeout per nine at 10.21. I mean, these are all things that point to a guy that is going to continue to be a very good starting pitcher. He would absolutely be the Mets ace, and I'd be all in on acquiring him. Again, tomorrow's show, we'll talk a little bit more about the package it would take to pull off this trade, because 2 years of relatively cheap team control, not going to come cheap when it comes to the prospect return you're going to have to give up to get Joe Ryan, but he is pretty high on the list of impact arms you can get, and still just 29 years old. He'll turn 30 on June 5th next year. So he still has plenty of life left in that arm, and I would be all in on trying to acquire him. Now, we got a couple more guys who are in a similar age bracket, but they have signed contracts already. They signed pre-arb deals, so we're going to talk about some of these other pitchers here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, investments. When you don't have a full picture of your finances, you can end up leaving money on the table, and that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you, where you can link all of your accounts in minutes. Then you can see clear data visuals and get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. When I linked all my accounts on Monarch, I started to spot some things that I didn't like. The subscriptions I was paying for each month that I didn't even realize, the takeout bills and how much that added up each given month. By using Monarch, I was able to be smarter with my spending. Don't let this financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com in your browser, and you're going to get half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONMLB. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 15,000 subscribers. We're within 300 away from getting to that goal, so getting really close. Really do appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. All right, so now we're going to get into some guys who are entering their age 30 season or a little bit beyond that, who have signed deals previously, so they're not in arbitration, but they are all hitting free agency relatively soon. And this first guy is going to be a rental next year, finally getting himself out of an incredible team-friendly contract that David Stearns signed him to with the Brewers. If you're listening to the show for a while, you know what I'm talking about, and that is Freddy Peralta. Now, do the Brewers have to trade their ace? No. They can keep him. They can have him go through the next season. They are clearly a World Series contender. They might win one this year, although they lost game 1 to the Dodgers just barely last night. But Freddy Peralta is he's at that point in the timeline where the Brewers start to consider shopping him, because Corbin Burns was a year away from free agency. Boom, they traded him. Devin Williams, a year away from free agency. Boom, they traded him. Josh Hader, a little bit further out from that. I think it was maybe 2.5 years from free agency and they traded him. They regretted that one, but still, when it they didn't actually regret it. They regretted it that season. They ended up, through that trade, getting William Contreras, so it worked out great for him in the long run. But regardless, when it comes to Peralta, he's coming off a great season, a 2.70 ERA and 176 in 2/3 innings pitched. That was 33 starts for Peralta. It's an $8 million club option, so it's so cheap. I'd be all in on Freddy Peralta. He is the type of ace that you want headlining your rotation. It's just a matter of, if the Brewers are going to trade him, what's the cost going to be? I promise on tomorrow's show, when we're going through trade packages for my favorite guys, he's definitely going to be someone we talk about. Next guy up, Pablo Lopez. Pablo Lopez is 29. Actually, I should have mentioned Freddy Peralta is 29, and he is literally 1 day older than Joe Ryan. So I thought that was pretty funny that I was able to cut that off by a single day. But getting back to Pablo Lopez, Joe Ryan's teammate, also a 29-year-old. He's going to turn 30 a little bit sooner than those guys. He'll turn 30 March 7th of this upcoming year. He's coming off an injury-plagued season, had a shoulder injury. They cut him out for a while, got back on the mound in the second half, and then he had a forearm injury. Good news was there was no concern with his elbow. So the ligament was completely fine, so no concern about Tommy John. They actually said if the injury had happened at a different point in time, Pablo Lopez would have resumed pitching. It just happened in the middle of September. There wasn't enough time left in the season. The Twins were out of it, so they just shut him down for the year. But when he was on the mound, Pablo Lopez pitched to a 2.74 ERA in 75 and 2/3 innings pitched. The one guy that I'm looking at here that I did not pull up his contract, and it's an interesting one, so I want to get that real quick for you. He signed a 4-year, $73.5 million deal when he came to the Twins. He's got the most expensive years on that deal coming up, though. So the first year, it was $8.25 million. That was his final year of arbitration. And then they tacked on 3 years at $21.75 million apiece. So for the Twins, if you are, being a little more financially conscious this offseason, but you're going to trade one of those pitchers, maybe you trade Pablo Lopez and you keep Joe Ryan, because you could shed yourself of a $21.75 million salary for the upcoming season. And over the next 2 years, what is that? $43.5 million in salary. But Pablo Lopez has been very effective. He knows this division. He's got a career 3.81 ERA. Again, this past year, 2.74 ERA in 14 starts. Last year in 32 starts, he pitched to a 4.08 ERA. And he's a guy that's been a workhorse traditionally. This is really the first time in a couple years that he's had any injuries. And I don't remember if early on in his career it was injuries or just, I guess probably a little bit. He made 20 starts in 2021, 21 starts in 2019. So maybe there was something early on, but again, 2022, 32 starts, 2023, 32 starts, 2024, 32 starts. I wouldn't be too concerned about the health on him, even though he's coming off an injury-plagued year. He's not the traditional ace that you might say. I mean, I think probably best case scenario, Pablo Lopez slots in as your number 2 or number 3 if you have a really great rotation, but he has been an ace, and I think you could definitely work with him as your ace. I would really consider Pablo Lopez as a guy that could absolutely fill that void. I'd prefer Joe Ryan, but if it costs a lot more to get Joe Ryan, maybe it makes more sense to settle on Pablo Lopez instead. And here's another guy coming up that I've talked about a bunch on this show, and I probably will try to script out a mock trade for tomorrow's show, and that is Sandy Alcantara. He's 30, just turned 30 in September. He pitched to a 5.36 ERA this past season, which puts him in a really weird spot when it comes to his trade value. He made 31 starts. He was an out away from 175 innings pitched. He helped contribute to the Mets missing the playoffs. I was at that game. He looked like Terminator when he was standing on the top steps of that dugout. And I was sitting right behind the Marlins dugout on that game. And I was just thinking, man, he's going to just shove. And he did. Early on, didn't look good. And then he settled in and ended up pitching into the 8th inning, which was just so frustrating. But you look at his splits from this season, first half, he pitched to an abysmal 7.22 ERA. Second half, he pitched to a 3.33 ERA. Really did hit his stride. I think Sandy's going to be back to being an ace this year. I really do believe that. I just don't know what the Marlins are going to set that price on trading. What it would take to acquire him. But again, we'll talk about that more on tomorrow's show. Last guy for this segment who's in this same bracket of around 30 years old, and that is Drew Rasmussen, who is 30 years and 2 months old. He'll turn 31 next July. And he's coming off another great season, pitched to a 2.76 ERA in 2025 across 150 innings pitched. Last few years before that, really struggled to stay on the mound. I don't know if there was a TJ in there. I don't believe there was, but don't quote me on that. 44 and 2/3 innings pitched in 2023, and then very well could have been a TJ. Let me look it up and let me confirm. That's important to know. So let me go real quick and see if I can find. Okay, so he did get Tommy John surgery. Had a second Tommy John return. He said three elbow procedures. So that's a concern. But again, he's coming off a season where he pitched 150 innings to a 2.76 ERA, and he's cheap when it comes to the contract. You're looking at this upcoming season making $5.75 million. Then there is a club option in 2027 for $8 million, and there is escalators in that contract. These are cumulative escalators. So from what I gather, for each of these games started, his option for the club option for 2027 will raise in price. So if he makes 8 starts, that's going to bump up to another $500K added. If he makes 12 starts, you tack on $750K. If he makes 16 starts, you tack on $1 million. 20 starts, tack on another $1 million. 24 starts, tack on $1.25 million. 28 starts, tack on $1.5 million. Put it all together, that's $6 million in escalators. So if you get a completely healthy and effective Drew Rasmussen, then he is going to be looking at a club option of $14 million. But if he was healthy and he pitched to a 2.5 ERA or whatever he ends up doing, or a 2.76 ERA again, you'd pick that up. I think the Rays will definitely consider shopping him just because of clearly that fragility that he's had with his elbow. They have other arms in their rotation. I could see him moved. He's an interesting one. I think there's a little bit too much risk there, especially now that I'm hearing 3 elbow surgeries. And I also just don't know how much I completely buy into him as an ace. I mean, he's got a career 2.89 ERA. So that tells you something. He is very effective. He does not walk a lot of batters. He keeps the ball in the yard, but he didn't strike out too many this year. Some of the expected metrics will say he was a little bit worse. His xFIP was 3.72, xERA 3.45. He's an interesting one. I don't think I'm going to do a mock trade on him tomorrow, but I wanted to mention him because he is a guy that I could see moved, and definitely one that you'd have to consider, making a trade for. He's just not as high on my personal list as some of these other guys we've discussed. Final segment coming up. I got 3 more names to discuss. These guys have been around for a long time, and they are at the twilight of their primes, but there might still be another couple good years left. And with the contracts they have, they might not cost as much when it comes to prospect capital to get them. So we're going to talk about the vets here to close out the show in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season's here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and you're going to get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. You pick a bet, you put down $5, and if it hits, you're going to lock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet, whether it's player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes watching football even more exciting when you got a little bit of something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or you love diving into the stats, FanDuel is going to make the game day experience so much better. It's quick, it's easy, it's the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. If you're an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. It's our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the match. You can ask me questions anytime. Take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways and get the line graphic sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so first up when it comes to our veterans, another guy who is pitching in the playoffs, and I believe he'll make a Game 3 start coming up in the ALCS, and that is Luis Castillo. Castillo has 2 years left of team control with a vesting option. It's $24.15 million that he'll make in 2026 and 2027, a $25 million vesting option if he hits 180 innings pitched in 2027. If he misses 130 plus days due to a UCL injury in 2025, 2026, or 2027. So at this point, if he has TJ over the next 2 years, you will get a very team-friendly option on the back end that is only worth $5 million. So a little bit of injury insurance that was baked into that contract. But Castillo is one of the most consistent starting pitchers in Major League Baseball. Why would the Mariners trade him? Because they have a lot of arms already in the stable. And if they want to spend to retain a Josh Naylor or an Eugenio Suarez to bolster that lineup for the upcoming season, maybe this is a way to reallocate some of those funds around. Now, granted, they very well could be riding high off of a World Series win where they don't want to touch their team. They also, even if they don't win the World Series, they're going to have a little bit of a windfall in profits from all these playoff games. So it really is a tough thing to predict whether he's actually going to be on the market, but he definitely was last winter. So it was worth bringing him up again. I don't think I'll mock a trade from him or for him tomorrow just because of the fact that he's still pitching in the playoffs. But again, if you want to talk about consistency, look at what this guy has done ever since 2018. Made 31 starts that year, pitched to a 4.30, but after that, 2019, it was 32 starts, 3.40 ERA. He was healthy in 2020, 3.21 ERA and 12 starts. 2021, pitched 187 and 2/3 innings to a 3.98. He gets traded to the Mariners in 2022, made 25 starts that year. That was the 1 year we got a little bit banged up. Still 150 innings pitched to a 2.99 ERA. Last couple of years in Seattle, 2023, 197 innings pitched, had a 3.34 ERA. Last year, 175 and a third innings pitched, 3.64 ERA. This year, 32 starts, 180 and 2/3 innings pitched, 3.54 ERA. For a Mets rotation that did not have a bedrock this past season, I feel great about Luis Castillo being that foundation. Even if he's not necessarily an top flight ace anymore, you pair him with Nolan McLean, and I just feel very good about where the Mets rotation would be. I just don't know if he's going to get traded, but definitely a name that I thought it was worth mentioning. A guy that apparently is willing to waive his no trade clause to go to a contender this winter is Sonny Gray. Sonny Gray, 35 years old, is going to turn 36 a couple weeks now at the beginning of November. He did not have the best season when you look at his ERA overall. He pitched to a 4.28 ERA, but if you look at some of the metrics, They tell you he's much better than that. His FIP was 3.39. That's fielding independent pitching. His xFIP, which is another layer of that, so that's his expected fielding independent pitching. That's really removing everything, right? It's removing park factor, defense. It's just looking at exactly what this guy should have been when it comes to strikeout rate, walk rate, home run rate, how that all comes together and how effective he should have been. Got him at a 3.07, 32 starts made this past year, 180 and 2/3 innings pitched. And I believe he hurt his hamstring in spring training. So the fact that he still made 32 starts and pitched 180 innings, that's a testament to this guy who has been a workhorse over the last 3 years in particular, but really for most of his career, he's been relatively healthy. I mean, outside of 2020, which obviously, he wasn't going to pitch 100 innings that year. He's been looking at least 115 every season. Just a guy that's been on the mound and has had a very good career, a 3.58 career ERA. Granted, there is the fact that he went to the Yankees and did not pitch well. His worst season was with the Yankees. So probably worst year and a half was with the Yankees. How much of that was New York? How much of that was how the Yankees go about things? He's talked about it after it's come to light after that. They tried to change him as a pitcher and it didn't work. And then he goes to Cincinnati and gets back to being who he, was and has a ton of success. And now he has had even more success with the Twins and then most recently with the Cardinals. I'd absolutely pick up Sonny Gray. I would not have any hesitation about the New York thing. He does make a good amount of money here. You're talking about a rental for this upcoming season where he's going to be making, I believe, $25 million. It's $25 million. It was a 3-year, $75 million deal. I got a club option on it that I did write in my notes here. Let me pull up the exact terms of the deal. The club option is for $30 million. Essentially like a vesting mutual option. So it starts off as a club option with a $5 million buyout. Deferred on that buyout. So he would collect $1 million a year from 2027 through 2031 if the Mets did not want to pick up that option. But if they pick up that option, he does not want to pitch for the Mets. He wants to hit free agency. He can then opt out of it and just hit the market without collecting a buyout. So that's an interesting part of the deal. Also, now that I'm looking at this contract, backloaded. Did not realize that. So that would theoretically make him even cheaper to acquire when it comes to prospect capital, especially because he has the no trade clause. This would almost be a pseudo free agent where he could kind of pick his destination because of that no trade clause and because he's going to make $35 million this next season. I'm sure the Cardinals, who are going to be a little bit of a transitionary year with Chaim Bloom being the signal caller for the first time in that front office, maybe that'd be a guy that really want to clear out and get some fresh blood in. So I think you could acquire Sonny Gray for a pretty fair price. And I think he's a guy that could absolutely be your ace. So definitely a name to watch. Last guy to talk about. Save the best for last. Can you guess? Can you guess who I'm going to mention as the final guy who is 37 years old, which makes me feel really old, who just would be the most amazing fit atop the Mets rotation? Be a simple kind of man. Jacob deGrom coming back. Got to mention it, right? Is it realistic? Probably not. I want to speak this thing into existence just because Jacob deGrom should come back to the Mets for his legacy. Jacob deGrom, if he wants to win, if he wants to pitch in big-time playoff games, are the Rangers the team to do it? I mean, sure, they won the World Series when he was on the shelf with the TJ. I don't know if the Rangers right now are going to be the favorites in the AL West. Not that the Mets are going to be the favorites in the NL East, but you know that they're going to do everything they can to be in contention. The Rangers might, welcome clearing that money off their books. Not that Jacob deGrom is not awesome. He still is. This past season, a 2.97 ERA and 172 and 2/3 innings pitch. I'm not saying the Rangers are shopping Jacob deGrom. For deGrom to be a legitimate trade candidate for the Mets, what you would need to happen is you would need to be able to, get in contact with Jake and talk it through and really see if he'd want to come back. Because again, he's got a no trade clause. So that right there could just end the conversation. If he likes pitching in Texas, if he likes living in Texas, which I'm sure he likes living in Texas a lot more than he liked living in New York. I mean, that I think is a pretty safe assumption. So you'd really have to sell him on it, but to come back to the Mets and finish off this contract, for the Rangers to clear $38 million for their books next season, it would just open up a world of possibilities for their roster. He's going to make $38 million next year, $37 the following year, and then it's a $20 million club option that becomes a player option if he's a healthy Jacob deGrom, basically, because if he's healthy, pitches 160 innings in 2028, in 2027, 160 innings, it's healthy, and finishes in the top 5 of the Cy Young voting, that $20 million club option becomes a $37 million player option. So that's the contract. Look, I love Jacob deGrom back in a Mets uniform. You better believe I'm going to put him in the podcast tomorrow when I do mock trades, just because it's a fun thing to talk about. I don't think it's very likely whatsoever, though. I think the Rangers probably are looking at Jacob deGrom as the building block to try to win with, where, hey, if you get into October with a healthy Jacob deGrom and Nathan Eovaldi, you can win another World Series. And so I'm sure that's where their head's at. I don't think that they're going to be actively shopping him, but if you could find a way to broach that conversation and open that dialogue with the Rangers, and they allow you to open that dialogue with deGrom, and deGrom, indicates that he'd be willing to come back and maybe would want to come back to finish off his career in a Mets uniform and to, get to pitch in big time playoff games in New York again, it would be a match made in heaven. Again, don't think it's going to happen, but boy, would I love to speak it into existence. And we'll try to continue to speak it into existence on tomorrow's show. Off the top of my head, the top targets of these 11 that I think I'm going to explore further on the mock trade show tomorrow: Joe Ryan, absolutely. Freddy Peralta makes a lot of sense to talk about. Jacob deGrom, we're definitely going to mention, and Sandy Alcantara. Those are the 4 that I like the most. As far as that exercise, all 11 of these names I would be on to some degree. Some more than others, but I think any of these 11 pitchers I talked about on today's show could absolutely help the New York Mets. But again, as we're going to expand things further, I will narrow this field down to 4, maybe 5 names, and we'll just go through some mock trades tomorrow and what it would cost to potentially acquire some of these guys. That's going to be all for today's show, though. So I appreciate all of you for tuning in. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, being part of our texting service, you can find a link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. And you can make a Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now, for your second watch, head over to Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. Find Locked On Sports Today, again, streaming 24/7 on YouTube.